They thought he was just the night cleaner. They laughed when he questioned the engine diagnostics. Some even pulled out their phones to record the humiliation. But what they didn't know was that this quiet single father once designed aircraft for the world's most exclusive clients, and the billionaire mocking him had just made the biggest mistake of her career. This isn't just a story about jets and egos. It's about dignity, redemption, and how one man's silence carried more weight than a fortune ever could. If stories like this move you, tales of courage, humility, and the belief that good people still rise when it matters most, we invite you to subscribe to our channel. We tell real stories with heart, stories that remind us what truly defines greatness. Now, take a deep breath, because what happens next will leave you speechless. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The hangar at Skybridge Aviation gleamed like polished silver under the early morning Sunday. Rows of private jets sat silent and majestic, each worth more than most people would earn in 10 lifetimes. The air smelled of jet fuel, leather, and money, the kind of place where billionaires arrived in convoys and departed in clouds. Landon arrived on foot. He clocked in at 5:47 a.m., 3 minutes earlier than required, just as he had every morning for the past 2 years. His uniform was simple, navy blue coveralls with maintenance staff, stitched across the back in faded white thread, steel-toed boots that had seen better days, and a badge that granted him access to every aircraft on the property, but respect from almost no one. He didn't mind. Respect was loud, and Landon had learned to live in the quiet. The night shift supervisor, a gruff man named Bill, nodded as Landon passed through the security checkpoint. "Morning, Pierce. Got a full lineup today. That new Gulfstream in Bay 7 needs a deep clean before the owner arrives at noon." "Understood," Landon replied, his voice calm and even. Bill hesitated, then added, "And heads up, the CEO's flying in this morning. Adeline Scott herself. Try to stay out of sight. Yeah, she's got a temper when things aren't perfect." Landon nodded once and moved toward the supply closet. He filled his cart with microfiber cloths, polish, glass cleaner, and the specialized solutions used for aircraft interiors. Everything had its place. Everything had a purpose. He worked methodically, never rushing, never cutting corners. By 7:30 a.m., the hangar buzzed with activity. Pilots in crisp uniforms reviewed flight plans. Mechanics ran diagnostics on engines. Administrative staff hurried between offices with tablets and coffee cups. And then she arrived. Adeline Scott stepped out of a black SUV like she owned the sunrise itself. Mid-40s, platinum blonde hair pulled into a flawless bun, designer sunglasses perched on her nose, and a tailored white suit that probably cost more than Landon's annual salary. She moved with the kind of confidence that came not from effort, but from never having been told no. Behind her trailed an entourage, a personal assistant clutching a tablet, a publicist on the phone, and a photographer snapping candid shots for her social media empire. Adeline Scott wasn't just a CEO, she was a brand. Her face appeared on magazine covers, her quotes circulated in business schools, and her net worth was a number most people couldn't fathom. Skybridge Aviation was her crown jewel, a luxury private jet company catering to the ultra-wealthy. She'd built it from the ground up, or so the story went, and she never let anyone forget it. Landon watched from inside the cockpit of the Gulfstream, where he was wiping down the instrument panel. Through the curved windshield, he could see her holding court near the main office, gesturing dramatically while her team nodded along. He returned to his work. 30 minutes later, Adeline's heels clicked sharply across the hangar floor. She was doing a walkthrough, inspecting the fleet before her morning meetings. Her assistant scrambled to keep up, reading off a list of appointments and updates. "Bay 7 next," Adeline said crisply. "I want to see the Gulfstream before the Hendersons arrive." She reached the jet and stopped at the base of the stairs. Landon was just descending, cleaning cart in tow. He stepped aside to let her pass, but she didn't move. Instead, she looked him up and down, with the kind of gaze reserved for something stuck to the bottom of a shoe. "You're the cleaner?" she asked, though it wasn't really a question. "Yes, ma'am," Landon replied evenly. She glanced past him toward the open cabin door. "Did you finish the interior? Just completed it?" "Completed? Or rushed through it because you have other planes to clean?" Landon met her eyes, calm and unwavering. "Completed to? Standard, ma'am." Adeline's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "To whose standard? Yours or mine?" Before he could answer, she brushed past him and climbed the stairs. Her assistant and photographer followed. Landon stood at the bottom, waiting. Inside, Adeline ran a gloved finger along the armrest of one of the leather seats. She inspected the galley, the lavatory, even the overhead compartments. When she returned to the cabin entrance, she was holding a cloth. "This," she said, dangling it in front of her photographer, "is what happens when you hire people who think jets are just oversized cars." The photographer dutifully snapped a photo. Adeline descended the stairs and stopped directly in front of Landon. There was dust in the cup holders. Dust on a $60 million aircraft. Landon glanced at the cloth. It was clean, completely clean, but he said nothing. She continued, her voice rising just enough for others nearby to hear. "Do you understand what we do here? We don't clean buses. We maintain flying palaces. Our clients are royalty, CEOs, heads of state. They don't pay $250,000 per flight to sit in dust." "I understand," Landon said quietly. "Do you?" She stepped closer. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're sleepwalking through a job you barely qualify for." A few mechanics had stopped working. A pilot paused mid-checklist. Even Bill, the night supervisor, looked over from across the hangar. Everyone was watching now. Adeline turned to her assistant. "Make a note. I want all cleaning staff reevaluated by the end of the month. If they can't meet our standards, they're gone." "Yes, miss." "Scott," the assistant replied, typing furiously. Adeline looked back at Landon one last time. "Jets aren't for cleaners," she said coldly. "They're for people who understand excellence." Then she walked away, heels echoing like gunshots. Landon stood there for a moment, card handle still in his grip. His expression didn't change. No anger, no embarrassment, no defense. He simply turned and pushed his cart toward the next aircraft. But across the hangar, someone had been watching very closely. Summer Holt, a junior aviation coordinator in her late 20s, stood near the dispatch office with a clipboard in hand. She'd seen the entire exchange, and unlike the others who'd already returned to their tasks, she couldn't look away from Landon. There was something about the way he'd stood there. Not defeated, not humiliated, just still, like a man who'd weathered far worse storms and knew this was only weather. Summer had worked at Skybridge for 3 years. She knew every pilot, every mechanic, every admin by name, but Landon Pierce was a mystery. He showed up, did his work, and disappeared. No small talk, no complaints, no stories about his life. She'd tried to make conversation once, months ago, and he'd been polite, but brief. Most people assumed he was just shy or uninteresting, but Summer had noticed things others missed. The way he moved around the aircraft, never hesitating, always knowing exactly where to step. The way he sometimes paused near the cockpit, staring at the instruments with an expression she couldn't quite read. And once, she'd seen him catch a wrench that slipped from a mechanic's hand mid-air, reflexes too fast, too precise for someone who just pushed a mop. Now, watching him disappear into the shadows of Bay 9, Summer made a decision. She was going to find out who Landon Pierce really was, because men like him, men who could take that kind of public humiliation without flinching, were either broken beyond repair or hiding something extraordinary. And something told her it wasn't the first option. By lunchtime, the video was already circulating. Adeline Scott's personal photographer had edited the hangar footage into a sleek 30-second clip. It showed Adeline holding up the cloth, shaking her head in exaggerated disappointment, with a caption overlay that read, "Excellence is non-negotiable." Even the smallest details matter when you're building an empire. The video cut to Landon standing silently at the base of the stairs, face partially obscured, looking every bit the part of a chastised employee. The final frame froze on Adeline's perfectly styled smile, with her company logo gleaming in the background. Within 2 hours, it had 170,000 views. By evening, it was trending on 3 platforms. The comments section became a feeding frenzy. Some praised Adeline's commitment to standards. Others made jokes at Landon's expense. Imagine getting roasted by a billionaire before breakfast. One comment read, followed by a string of laughing emojis. Another said, that cleaner's face, he knew he messed up. A few voices pushed back. This feels cruel, someone wrote. He's just doing his job. But those comments were quickly buried under waves of engagement, likes, and shares. Inside Skybridge's employee break room, a cluster of younger staff members huddled around a phone, watching the video on repeat. They whispered and snickered, glancing occasionally toward the corner table where Landon sat alone, eating a sandwich he'd packed from home. He didn't look at them, didn't acknowledge the stares. He simply ate, methodically, then stood, disposed of his trash, and returned to work. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. But the damage was spreading. By the next morning, local business blogs had picked up the story. Billionaire CEO schools employee on luxury standards, read one headline. Another framed it as a masterclass in leadership. How Adeline Scott maintains her empire. No detail too small. A podcaster even did a 7-minute segment titled, The Cleaner and the Queen, dissecting the power dynamics and praising Adeline's hands. On approach, Landon heard none of it. He didn't own a smartphone, didn't follow social media, and didn't engage with office gossip. He showed up at 5:47 a.m., just like always, and cleaned aircraft with the same quiet precision. But others noticed. Summer Holt watched the video 3 times, and each time she felt a tightness in her chest. It wasn't just the public shaming. It was the way Adeline had performed it, the way she'd made sure cameras captured every moment, the way Landon had been turned into content. She walked through the hangar that afternoon and found Landon crouched beside the landing gear of a Bombardier, inspecting the hydraulic lines with a flashlight. "Hey," she said softly. He looked up, surprised. "Miss Holt." "Just Summer," she corrected, crouching down beside him. "You doing okay?" "I'm fine." "That video," she hesitated. "It's all over the internet." Landon's jaw tightened just slightly, but his voice remained calm. "I don't pay attention to that stuff. You should know people are talking." "People always talk," he replied. "Doesn't change the work." Summer studied him. Most people would be furious, humiliated, or at least defensive. But Landon just looked tired, the kind of tired that came from carrying weight no one else could see. "She had no right to do that to you," Summer said. Landon set down the flashlight and finally met her eyes. "She owns the company. She has every right, not to humiliate you publicly." He smiled faintly, but there was no humor in it. "I've been humiliated by worse." The words hung in the air, heavy and unspoken. Summer wanted to ask what he meant, but something stopped her. Instead, she asked, "How long have you worked here?" 2 years, give or take." "And before that?" He stood, brushing dust from his coveralls. "Before that doesn't matter." "It matters to me." Landon paused, studying her with an expression that was hard to read. Then, gently, he said, "Why?" Summer didn't have a good answer. Or maybe she did, but couldn't say it out loud. "Because you move like someone who's flown these planes, not cleaned them. Because you don't flinch when others would crumble. Because something about you doesn't add up, and I can't stop trying to solve it." Instead, she just said, "Because I think you deserve better than this." Landon's expression softened. Deserving and getting are 2 different things. "Summer, I learned that a long time ago. He picked up his toolbox and walked toward the next bay, leaving her standing alone beneath the wing of a jet worth more than her entire neighborhood. That evening, Adeline hosted a private dinner at Ashford Heights' most exclusive rooftop restaurant. Investors, influencers, and industry elites filled the space. Champagne flowed. Deals were made. And at the center of it all, Adeline held court, effortlessly charming and ruthlessly sharp. At one point, someone brought up the viral video. "I saw your clip," a venture capitalist said with a grin. "Tough love, huh?" Adeline laughed lightly. Standards aren't optional. If you let one thing slide, everything falls apart. Still, another guest chimed in. The guy looked pretty defeated. "Then maybe he'll work harder," Adeline replied smoothly, raising her glass. "Or find a job more suited to his skill set." The table chuckled. The conversation moved on. And somewhere across the city, in a small apartment with peeling paint and second-hand furniture, Landon Pierce read a bedtime story to his 10-year-old son, tucked him in, and sat alone in the dark, staring at a photograph he kept hidden in a drawer. It was a picture of him standing in front of a sleek aircraft, younger, sharper, wearing a suit and holding a blueprint. Behind him, a banner read, "Pierce Aeronautics, innovating the future of private aviation." He closed the drawer and whispered into the silence, "Not yet. But soon, the world would remember his name. And this time, it wouldn't be as the cleaner." Summer Holt couldn't let it go. 3 days had passed since the video went viral. And while the internet had already moved on to the next scandal, Summer remained fixated on the mystery of Landon Pierce. She'd tried searching his name online, but found nothing. No social media profiles. No LinkedIn. No digital footprint whatsoever. In an age where everyone existed somewhere online, his absence felt intentional. She sat in the dispatch office during her lunch break, pretending to review flight schedules while actually combing through Skybridge's employee database. Landon's file was bare bones. Hired 2 years ago, background check cleared, emergency contact listed as Isaac Pierce, son, and a single reference from a previous employer, labeled only as verified privately. No employment history, no certifications, nothing. Looking for something, Summer jumped. Bill, the night supervisor, stood in the doorway holding a coffee mug that read, "I'm not arguing, I'm just explaining why I'm right." Just cross, referencing some scheduling conflicts. Summer lied smoothly. Bill grunted. "You're a terrible liar, Holt. You're looking into Pierce." She closed the laptop. "Is that a problem?" "Depends on why." "I'm curious." Bill stepped inside and closed the door behind him. He sat down heavily in the chair across from her. "Curiosity is how people get hurt." "What do you mean?" He sighed, staring into his coffee like it held answers. "I've been working nights here for 12 years. I've seen a lot of people come and go. Most are exactly what they seem. Mechanics who wrench, pilots who fly, cleaners who clean. But every once in a while, someone walks through that door who doesn't fit." "And Landon?" "Landon is a man who doesn't want to be found," Bill said carefully. "And in my experience, men like that have reasons. Good reasons or bad reasons." Bill met her eyes. "That's what you're trying to figure out, isn't it?" Summer leaned forward. "Have you ever seen him do anything unusual?" Bill was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "About 6 months ago, one of our Cessna Citations had an engine malfunction during a pre-flight check. Fuel pressure issue. 3 of our top mechanics were stumped, couldn't figure out the root cause. We were about to ground the plane and call in a specialist from the manufacturer. And Landon was cleaning the cockpit. Overheard the whole thing, didn't say a word, just walked over to the engine cowling, stared at it for maybe 30 seconds, then pointed to a specific valve and said, 'Check the regulator connection on the secondary fuel line. It's cross-threaded.'" Summer's eyes widened. "Was he right?" Bill nodded. "Not only was he right, but he identified a problem that would have taken the specialists hours to find, saved the company 50 grand in emergency repairs, and prevented a potential in-flight failure. What did the mechanics say? They were too shocked to say much. Asked him how he knew. He just shrugged and said he'd seen similar issues before. Bill paused. But here's the thing, Summer. The way he looked at that engine. That wasn't a cleaner who'd seen similar issues. That was someone who'd designed the damn thing. A chill ran down Summer's spine. Did you report it? Tell management? I mentioned it to the operations director. He brushed it off. Said Pierce probably got lucky, or overheard it somewhere. Bill leaned back. But I've been around aircraft my whole life. Luck doesn't sound like that. Knowledge does. Summer's mind raced. There's something else, isn't there? Bill hesitated, then pulled out his phone. He scrolled through his photos and turned the screen toward her. It showed Landon in the far corner of the hangar late at night, long after his shift had ended. He was crouched beside a partially disassembled turbine engine, tools spread around him, studying the components with intense focus. I came in early one morning, around 4 a.m., Bill explained. Found him like this. Asked what he was doing. He said one of the mechanics had been struggling with a turbine rebuild, and he was just checking to see if he could help. And, by the time the mechanic arrived at 6 a.m., the engine was fully rebuilt. Perfect. Not a bolt out of place. Bill pocketed his phone. That kind of work takes years of training, certifications, expertise. It's not something a cleaner picks up from watching YouTube videos. Summer sat back, processing everything. So why is he here? Why is someone with that kind of knowledge scrubbing toilets and polishing windows? That, Bill said, standing up, is the question you should be asking him, not me. After Bill left, Summer sat alone in the office, staring at the closed employee file on her screen. Every instinct told her to dig deeper, to push harder. But another part of her, the part that had watched Landon stand silently while being publicly humiliated, wondered if some doors were closed for a reason. That evening, she found herself walking through the hangar after most of the staff had left. The space felt different at night, quieter, almost sacred. The jets sat like sleeping giants, their polished surfaces reflecting the overhead lights. She heard a sound from Bay 4, a soft metallic clink. She walked toward it and found Landon, sitting on a workbench, a small notebook open in his lap. He was sketching something, his pencil moving with confident, precise strokes. Working late? Summer asked. Landon looked up, startled. He quickly closed the notebook, just finishing some notes. Notes on what? Maintenance schedules, he said, but his tone suggested otherwise. Summer stepped closer, nodding toward the notebook. Can I see? It's nothing interesting. I'll be the judge of that. They locked eyes for a moment. Then, with visible reluctance, Landon handed her the notebook. Summer opened it, and her breath caught. The pages were filled with detailed technical drawings, aircraft schematics, aerodynamic calculations, and handwritten notes about fuel efficiency improvements and structural modifications. These weren't maintenance notes. These were designs, professional-grade engineering work. Landon, she said slowly, what is this? He took the notebook back gently. Old habits. These aren't habits. This is expertise. He stood up, tucking the notebook into his bag. It's late. Summer, you should head home. Not until you tell me the truth. The truth about what? About who you really are. She pressed. Because you're not just a cleaner. You're not even just a mechanic. You're someone who understands these aircraft on a level most people in this building never will. Landon's expression shifted, something flickering behind his eyes. Grief. Maybe. Or fear. What I was doesn't matter anymore. It matters to me. Why? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Because, Summer said, surprised by her own intensity, I'm tired of watching people like Adeline Scott treat good people like they're disposable. And I'm tired of watching you pretend you're less than you are." Landon was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with the weight of years. "I had a life before this. A career. A company. A family." He paused. "And I lost all of it." "How?" He looked away. "Because I chose wrong. I chose ambition over presence, success over moments. And by the time I realized what I'd lost, it was too late to get it back." Summer's heart ached. "So you walked away?" "I didn't walk," Landon said quietly. "I crawled, and when I finally stood up again, I decided the man I used to be wasn't worth going back to." "But you're still here. Still around these planes." He smiled sadly. "Because even though I walked away from who I was, I couldn't walk away from what I loved." He gestured toward the jets. "These machines, they don't care about your mistakes. They don't judge. They just fly, if you treat them right." Summer didn't know what to say. She wanted to tell him he deserved better, that hiding wasn't healing, that the world needed people like him. But she could see in his eyes that he'd heard all of that before, probably from people he'd loved and lost. Instead, she simply said, "Thank you for trusting me." Landon nodded. "Just don't make me regret it." As Summer walked toward the exit, she glanced back one last time. Landon had reopened his notebook and was sketching again, lost in a world where wings and physics made sense, and the past didn't hurt quite so much. She made a decision then. Whatever Landon was running from, whatever he'd lost, she was going to help him find his way back. Not to who he was, but to who he could still become. And it started with making sure Adeline Scott never humiliated him again. The next morning, Summer arrived at Skybridge an hour early. She hadn't slept well, her mind spinning with questions about Landon Pierce, and the notebook full of designs that belonged in an engineering firm, not in the hands of a night cleaner. She made her way to the administrative archives, a dusty room in the back of the main office where old files and records were stored before being digitized. If Landon had any history in aviation, there might be something here, a contract, a reference, anything. She pulled boxes labeled with dates from 3 to 5 years ago, searching for any mention of his name. Nothing. Then she tried searching for aircraft design firms, independent contractors, anyone who might have worked with Skybridge in the past. 2 hours in, covered in dust and about to give up, she found something. It was a yellowed newspaper clipping tucked inside a folder marked Industry Partners 2019. The headline read, "Pierce Aeronautics closes doors after founder's personal tragedy." Summer's hands trembled as she read. Pierce Aeronautics, once a rising star in custom private aircraft design, has officially ceased operations following the death of founder Landon Pierce's wife, Elena Pierce, after a lengthy battle with illness. The company, which had secured contracts with several high-profile clients and was considered a pioneer in fuel-efficient luxury aviation, will be dissolved. Pierce could not be reached for comment. Industry insiders report that he has stepped away from aviation entirely. There was a photo. A younger Landon, clean-shaven, wearing a suit, standing beside a sleek white aircraft with Pierce Aeronautics emblazoned on the tail. His smile was confident, proud. He looked like a different person. Summer sat back, the weight of discovery settling over her. He hadn't just worked in aviation. He'd built a company. He'd been an innovator, a designer, someone respected in the industry, and then he'd lost everything. She carefully photographed the article with her phone and returned the file to its place. As she left the archives, her mind raced. Landon wasn't hiding because he'd failed. He was hiding because success had cost him everything that mattered. Later that afternoon, she found him in Bay 12, wiping down the interior of a Learjet. She approached cautiously, unsure how to begin. "Landon," she said softly. He turned, cloth in hand. "Summer, twice in 2 days. People are going to think we're friends." "Maybe we are," she replied. He gave a faint smile but said nothing. She took a breath. I found something this morning. An old newspaper article. His smile faded. You've been digging. I needed to understand. Understand what? Why you're here, she said. Why someone who built his own company is cleaning planes instead of designing them. Landon set down the cloth and leaned against the bulkhead. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, quietly, he began to speak. Elena and I met in college. She was studying business. I was in aerospace engineering. We used to joke that she'd sell whatever I built. He paused, lost in memory. After graduation, I got a job with a major manufacturer. But I always wanted to build something of my own. Something that mattered. So you started Pierce Aeronautics, Summer said gently. He nodded. Took us 8 years. We poured everything into it. Every dollar, every hour, every piece of ourselves. And it worked. We landed contracts, built a reputation, started making real money. His voice grew quieter. But I was never home. Always at the hangar. Always on calls. Always chasing the next design, the next client. Summer could see where this was going, but she let him continue. Elena got sick when Isaac was 7. Stage 3, they said. Treatable, they said. But treatment meant time, attention, presence. And I kept telling myself I'd slow down after the next contract, after the next delivery, after we secured funding. He looked down at his hands. I kept telling myself I had time. But you didn't, Summer whispered. She died on a Tuesday, Landon said, his voice breaking slightly. I was in a meeting with investors. My phone was on silent. By the time I saw the messages, she was already gone. He wiped his eyes roughly. Isaac was at the hospital with my sister. He was alone when it happened, because I chose a conference room over my family. Summer felt tears welling up. Landon, you couldn't have known. That's what everyone said. He replied bitterly. But I did know. She'd been asking me to slow down for months, begging me to be present. And I kept promising I would, right after this next thing. He straightened up. After the funeral, I couldn't look at those planes anymore. Couldn't walk into the hangar without seeing her face, hearing her voice, asking me to come home. So you shut it down. I burned it down. He corrected. Dissolved the company, sold the patents, walked away from everything. Some people thought I had a breakdown. Maybe I did. All I knew was that I'd spent years building machines that flew, and I'd forgotten how to be a father, how to be a husband, how to be human. Summer stepped closer. And you came here. I came here, he confirmed, because I needed to be around what I loved without the pressure of being someone important. I needed to remember that these aircraft are just metal and fuel and physics. They don't care about your titles or your bank account. They just need someone to care for them properly. He met her eyes. And I needed to be there when Isaac got home from school. To make him dinner. To help with homework. To be the father I should have been all along. That's not hiding, Summer said firmly. That's healing. Is it? Landon asked. Because some days, it feels like I'm just punishing myself in slow motion. You're raising your son, she countered. You're showing up every day. You're doing work that matters, even if people like Adeline Scott can't see it. At the mention of Adeline's name, Landon's expression hardened slightly. She reminds me of who I used to be. Obsessed with image, with perfection, with being seen as the best. I look at her and I see myself 10 years ago. And it makes me sick. Summer understood then. The reason Landon had taken the humiliation so quietly wasn't because he was weak. It was because he recognized the person wielding the weapon. He'd been her once, and he knew exactly how much damage that kind of ambition could cause. What if you could show her? Summer asked suddenly. Show her what? That there's another way. That strength isn't about domination. That excellence doesn't require humiliation. Landon shook his head. She wouldn't listen. People like that never do, not until life forces them to. Then maybe, Summer said carefully. Life needs a little push. Before Landon could respond, Bill's voice crackled over the hangar intercom. All personnel, report to the main briefing room immediately. Mandatory meeting in 10 minutes. Summer and Landon exchanged glances. Mandatory meetings were rare, usually reserved for major announcements or emergencies. They made their way to the briefing room along with dozens of other employees. The space filled quickly, mechanics standing alongside pilots, administrative staff crowding near the back, cleaners like Landon hovering uncertainly near the exits. Adeline Scott stood at the front, immaculate, as always, in a charcoal suit. Beside her stood a man in his 60s, silver-haired and stern-faced. Summer recognized him as Harold Westbrook, chairman of Skybridge's board of directors. "Thank you all for coming on short notice," Adeline began, her voice carrying effortlessly across the room. "I'll keep this brief. As you know, Skybridge has been selected to compete for the Meridian contract, the single largest private aviation deal in the industry's history." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The Meridian contract was legendary, a 10-year agreement to provide exclusive aircraft and services to a coalition of international corporations. The company that won would dominate the luxury aviation market for the next decade. "The final presentation is in 2 weeks," Adeline continued. "We'll be competing against Vanguard Air and Celestial Jets. To win, we need to demonstrate not just superior aircraft, but superior innovation." She paused dramatically. "Which is why we're hosting an open challenge." The room went silent. Any employee, regardless of position, can submit a design proposal for a next-generation luxury aircraft. The best proposal will be presented to the Meridian executives as Skybridge's flagship concept. She smiled coldly. "Of course, most of you lack the expertise, but I believe in meritocracy. If someone here has a brilliant idea hiding beneath their uniform, now's their chance to prove it." Summer's heart began to race. She glanced at Landon, but he was staring straight ahead, expression unreadable. Adeline's gaze swept the room and landed, unmistakably, on Landon. "Who knows? Maybe even our cleaning staff will surprise us." A few people chuckled. Landon didn't react. Harold Westbrook stepped forward. "Submissions are due in 1 week. They'll be reviewed by our engineering team and myself personally. The winner receives a $50,000 bonus and full credit on the project." As the meeting dismissed, Summer grabbed Landon's arm. "This is it. This is your chance." "No," Landon said immediately. "Why not?" "You have designs already. I've seen them. Those are private," he said firmly. "They're not for her. Not for this. But you could win. You could show everyone who you really are." Landon pulled his arm free gently. "I spent 10 years trying to show everyone who I was. It cost me everything. I'm not making that mistake again. This is different. Is it?" He looked at her sadly. "Or is this just another way for people like Adeline to extract value from people like me while taking all the credit?" Before Summer could argue further, Adeline's voice cut through the crowd. "Pierce. A word." Landon turned slowly. Adeline approached, her smile sharp as a blade. "I meant what I said," she told him. "Everyone's welcome to submit. Even you." "I appreciate the opportunity, Miss Scott," Landon replied evenly. "But I'm not a designer." "No," she agreed. "You're a cleaner. But who knows? Maybe you've absorbed something from being around greatness all this time." She leaned in slightly. "Or maybe you'll finally accept that some people are meant to build, and others are meant to clean up after them." Landon held her gaze. "I've built plenty, Miss Scott. I just learned to choose what's worth building." Something flickered in Adeline's expression, confusion, maybe even irritation. But she recovered quickly. "Well, if you change your mind, the door's open. I'd hate for you to miss your shot at relevance." She walked away, leaving Landon standing in the emptying room. Summer came up beside him. "You got under her skin just now." "I didn't mean to." "Yes, you did," Summer said with a small smile. "And you should do it again. Submit a design, Landon. Not for her, For yourself, for Isaac. Show him that starting over doesn't mean staying small forever. Landon was quiet for a long time. Then, almost to himself, he whispered, "I'll think about it." But Summer could see it in his eyes. He'd already decided. The only question was whether he'd have the courage to follow through. The week that followed felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. Throughout Skybridge Aviation, the atmosphere shifted from routine to electric. Engineers huddled over drafting tables during lunch breaks. Pilots sketched concepts on napkins. Even some of the administrative staff tried their hand at proposals, though most knew they'd be eliminated in the first round. Adeline Scott made sure the challenge remained highly visible. She posted daily updates on social media, teasing the competition and positioning Skybridge as a company where talent can emerge from anywhere. Her followers ate it up, praising her progressive leadership and innovative approach. What they didn't see were the private meetings, where she told her senior engineers to make sure nothing embarrassing makes it past the first screening. Landon hadn't touched his notebook in 3 days. He'd thought about it constantly, lying awake at night while Isaac slept in the next room, the designs playing out in his mind like films he couldn't stop watching. He had ideas, good ones, innovations in fuel efficiency and cabin pressurization that could revolutionize long-distance luxury travel, but every time he reached for the notebook, Elena's voice echoed in his memory. "You're chasing something that will never love you back." She'd said that 2 months before she died, standing in the doorway of his home office at midnight while he pored over schematics. He'd barely looked up, had promised he'd come to bed soon, had broken that promise like he'd broken so many others. On Thursday evening, Summer found him sitting alone in the employee parking lot, leaning against his old pickup truck, staring at the hangar. "You haven't submitted anything," she said, sitting beside him on the tailgate. "No. You're running out of time. Submissions close tomorrow at 5. "I know." She was quiet for a moment, then said, "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "What are you more afraid of? That you'll submit something and fail? Or that you'll submit something and succeed?" Landon looked at her, surprised by the question. She continued, "Because I've been watching you all week, and I don't think you're afraid of Adeline Scott or her engineers. I think you're afraid that if you're good at this again, if you let yourself be that person again, you lose sight of what matters." "That's exactly what I'm afraid of," Landon admitted. "But you're not that person anymore," Summer pressed. "The man who ignored his family, who chose ambition over presence. He died with Elena. The person you are now, he makes breakfast for his son. He shows up to work early. He helps people without asking for credit. That person doesn't disappear just because he's good at something." "How do you know?" "Because I've seen you," she said simply. "I've watched you turn down credit for fixing that engine. I've seen you stay late to help mechanics troubleshoot problems, then leave before anyone can thank you. You don't do this for recognition anymore. You do it because you can't help but care." Landon felt something loosen in his chest, a knot he'd been carrying for years. "Isaac asked me yesterday why I stopped being an engineer," he said quietly. "I told him I didn't stop. I just changed what I was building." He asked what I was building now. Landon smiled sadly. "I told him I was trying to build a better father." Summer's eyes glistened. "That's the most important thing you'll ever design." "But what if I could do both?" Landon asked, and for the first time in years, he let himself consider the possibility. "What if I could be present for him and still use the skills I spent my whole life developing? Then you'd be showing him something even more valuable," Summer said. "That you can start over without giving up who you are." That night, after Isaac fell asleep, Landon opened his notebook. He didn't think about Adeline or the competition or redemption. He thought about his son, about the world Isaac would inherit, about building something that mattered for the right reasons. He began to draw. By 3 a.m., he had something. Not just a design, but a vision. An aircraft that prioritized environmental sustainability without sacrificing luxury, that used advanced materials to reduce weight and fuel consumption by 40%, that incorporated safety features no one had thought to combine before. He called it the Horizon Project because it represented looking forward instead of backward. At 4:47 p.m. the next day, 13 minutes before the deadline, Landon walked into the submission office. The coordinator, a young woman named Rachel, looked up in surprise. "Mr. Pierce, are you submitting something?" He handed her a sealed envelope containing his proposal, complete with technical drawings, material specifications, and a detailed cost analysis. Yes. She accepted it, stamped it, received, and gave him a copy. Good luck. As Landon walked out, he passed a group of senior engineers, heading in with their own submissions. One of them, a man named Derek Chen, sneered. Didn't know janitors could draw. Everyone can draw, Landon replied calmly. Not everyone can see. By Monday morning, all submissions had been collected. 73 total, ranging from crude sketches on notebook paper to elaborate presentations bound in leather portfolios. The senior engineering team, along with Harold Westbrook and Adeline Scott, gathered in the conference room to review them. They worked quickly, eliminating the obviously unqualified within the first hour. Adeline made a show of giving each one fair consideration, but most were dismissed with barely a glance. "This one's from accounting," someone joked, holding up a drawing that looked like it had been done by a 6-year-old. "It's called the Sky Banana." Laughter filled the room. They narrowed it down to 12 finalists by lunch, then to 5 by mid-afternoon. All were from experienced engineers or designers. All were competent but predictable, variations on existing themes with minor improvements. Adeline was reviewing the 5th finalist when Harold picked up a submission that had been set aside in the questionable pile. "Wait," he said, studying the cover page. "Who's Landon Pierce?" One of the engineers spoke up. "That's the night cleaner, the one from your viral video, Adeline." The room went silent. Adeline's expression hardened. "And someone let him submit?" "You said anyone could," Harold replied mildly. "Let's at least look at it." "It's a waste of time," Adeline said dismissively. He probably copied something from the internet. But Harold was already opening the envelope, and as he began reading, his expression changed. He studied the technical drawings carefully, flipping through pages, his frown deepening with concentration. "This is remarkable," he said finally. "What is?" Adeline asked impatiently. "This design." Harold spread the drawings across the table. "It's not just innovative, it's revolutionary. Look at this fuel efficiency model, these structural integrity calculations, this approach to cabin pressurization." He looked up. "This is expert-level work." One of the senior engineers leaned over. "He's right. These aren't amateur sketches. This is professional, grade aerospace engineering. The math alone would take weeks to compile." Adeline snatched the papers, scanning them with growing disbelief. The design was flawless, elegant in its simplicity yet sophisticated in execution. It addressed problems she didn't even know needed solving. "This can't be real," she said. "He must have stolen it from somewhere." "Where?" Harold challenged. "I've been in this industry 40 years. I've never seen anything like this. It's completely original." "Then he had help. Someone drew this for him." "Does it matter?" Harold set down the proposal. "You announced an open competition. You said talent could come from anywhere. Well, here it is, from the last place you expected." Adeline's jaw clenched. "We're not seriously considering this." "I am," Harold said firmly. "In fact, I'm recommending we move this to the final round. Along with Chen's propulsion redesign and Martinez's aerodynamic model, we'll present all 3 to the board tomorrow morning." "That's not happening," Adeline said coldly. "I won't let this company be represented by a cleaner-playing engineer." "Then you're not the leader I thought you were," Harold replied, his voice quiet but steel, hard. You're just another executive afraid of being outshone by someone you underestimated." The words landed like a slap. Adeline stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. "Fine. Present it. But when this blows up in our faces, when he can't answer basic questions about his own design, don't say I didn't warn you." She left the room, heels clicking sharply down the hallway. Harold looked at the remaining engineers. "Get Pearson here tomorrow morning, 9 sharp, and someone make sure Adeline doesn't try to sabotage this before it starts." Outside in the hangar, Landon was emptying a trash bin when Summer ran up to him, breathless. "They picked yours," she gasped. "Your design made the final 3. Landon froze. "What?" Harold Westbrook himself advocated for it. "You're presenting to the board tomorrow morning." The trash bag slipped from Landon's hand. For the first time in years, he felt something he'd almost forgotten. Hope mixed with terror. "I can't," he said. "I can't stand in front of those people." "Yes, you can," Summer insisted. "Because this time you're not doing it for glory or contracts or proving anything. You're doing it because your design could actually change things, and because your son deserves to see his father stand up." Landon closed his eyes, breathing deeply. Then he opened them and met Summer's gaze. "Will you be there? Front row," she promised. Across the facility, in her private office, Adeline Scott stared at Landon's proposal spread across her desk. She'd read it 3 times now, and each time it became clearer, this wasn't just good. It was the kind of work that launched careers, the kind of innovation that defined companies. And it had come from a man she'd publicly humiliated, a man she'd dismissed as irrelevant. For the first time in years, Adeline Scott felt something unfamiliar. Doubt, not in her abilities, but in her judgment. She'd built an empire on reading people, on identifying talent and weakness. How had she missed this? She picked up her phone and made a call. "I need a full background check on Landon Pierce. Everything. I want to know who he was before he worked here. If he was going to challenge her, she needed to know what she was really up against. Tomorrow morning would reveal the truth for both of them." The boardroom at Skybridge Aviation had never felt smaller. 12 executives sat around the massive oak table, their faces a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. At the head sat Harold Westbrook, reading glasses perched on his nose, Landon's proposal open before him. To his right, Adeline Scott sat with perfect posture and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Summer stood near the back wall with several other junior staff members, allowed to observe but not participate. Her heart hammered as Landon entered the room, wearing the same navy coveralls he always wore, his work boots leaving faint marks on the polished marble floor. He'd refused to change. "If they want my ideas," he'd told Summer that morning, "they get all of me, not a costume." Harold gestured to the presentation area. "Mr. Pierce, thank you for joining us. I understand this is rather unexpected." "It is, sir," Landon replied quietly, setting down a worn folder. "Before we begin," Adeline interjected smoothly, "I think we all have questions about where this proposal actually originated. Mr. Pierce, for the record, did you have assistance in creating this design?" The room tensed. It was a direct challenge, barely veiled. Landon met her gaze steadily. "No, ma'am. Every calculation, every drawing, every specification came from my own work." "That's quite remarkable," Adeline continued, her tone suggesting the opposite. "Considering you're employed here as a maintenance cleaner, where exactly did you acquire aerospace engineering expertise?" Harold frowned. "Adeline, that's not necessary right now." "With respect, Harold, it's completely necessary. We're considering presenting this to potential clients worth billions. We need to verify authenticity." Landon remained calm. "I understand your concern, Miss Scott. I'd be suspicious too if I'd spent weeks assuming someone was incapable and then discovered otherwise." A few executives shifted uncomfortably. Adeline's smile tightened. "I founded Pierce Aeronautics 12 years ago. Landon continued. We specialized in custom luxury aircraft design. I hold patents in fuel efficiency systems and structural composite applications. I've designed aircraft for clients in 17 countries. He paused. After my wife died, I closed the company and walked away. I came here because I needed something simple, something that kept me close to what I loved, without the weight of expectation. The room was utterly silent. Even Adeline seemed momentarily speechless. One of the board members, an older woman named Patricia Mills, leaned forward. Pierce Aeronautics. I remember reading about that company. You developed the Echo system, didn't you? The pressure equalization, innovation? Landon nodded. Yes, ma'am. That was brilliant work. Patricia said. Why didn't you mention this when you were hired? Because I wasn't looking to be an engineer anymore. I was looking to be a father. The simple honesty of the statement hung in the air. Harold cleared his throat. Well then, Mr. Pierce, please walk us through your proposal. Landon opened his folder and began. His voice was quiet but confident, his explanations clear and thorough. He described the Horizon project not as someone trying to impress, but as someone sharing something he genuinely cared about. The core innovation, he explained, using a marker to sketch on the whiteboard, is the integration of 3 existing technologies in a way no one has attempted. By combining lightweight graphene composites with an adaptive wing design and a hybrid propulsion system, we can reduce fuel consumption by 42% while actually improving speed and range. That's theoretically impossible, one of the engineers interrupted. You can't increase efficiency and performance simultaneously without massive cost increases. You can, if you rethink the fundamental structure, Landon replied. He drew a cross-section of the wing. Traditional designs treat the wing as a static component, but if we incorporate responsive materials that adjust camber based on real-time airflow data, the wing optimizes itself continuously. Less drag, more lift, better efficiency. The computational power required for that would be enormous, another engineer argued. Not if you distribute the processing across multiple independent nodes instead of using a centralized system. Each wing section monitors and adjusts itself. The computational load becomes manageable. The questions came faster, more technical, more challenging. Landon answered each one without hesitation, without notes, drawing diagrams and equations from memory. It was clear to everyone in the room that they weren't watching a cleaner pretend to be an engineer. They were watching a master at work. Adeline sat frozen, her earlier confidence crumbling. She'd expected him to stumble, to reveal himself as a fraud, or at minimum someone in over his head. Instead, he was outperforming her senior engineering team. Patricia Mills asked the final question. Mr. Pierce, what's the estimated development cost for a full prototype? Depending on supplier negotiations and testing requirements, between 12 and 15 million. That's significantly less than comparable projects, because we're adapting existing technologies rather than inventing new ones from scratch. Harold closed his copy of the proposal. This is extraordinary work. I move that we adopt the Horizon project as our flagship presentation for the Meridian contract. Seconded, Patricia added immediately. Adeline finally found her voice. Wait. We can't make this decision based on one presentation. We need time to verify these calculations, to stress test the assumptions, to determine if this is actually viable or just theoretical fantasy. Then we'll do that, Harold said. Mr. Pierce, would you be willing to work with our engineering team this week to validate your proposal? Before Landon could answer, Adeline stood. Absolutely not. He's a cleaner, not a consultant. If we want this verified, we'll do it properly through established channels. Why? The question came from Patricia. Why are you so resistant to this, Adeline? Is it because the design is flawed, or because you can't accept that someone you dismissed might be exceptional? I won't dignify that with a response. Then let me dignify it for you, Patricia said sharply. You've built this company on supposedly valuing talent wherever it emerges. You post about meritocracy and opportunity. But the moment someone you've already categorized challenges your assumptions, you scramble to discredit him. She turned to Landon. Mr. Pierce, I apologize on behalf of this organization for how you've been treated. That's not necessary, Landon said quietly. Yes, it is, Patricia insisted. Excellence deserves recognition, regardless of the uniform it wears. Harold made a note. Motion passes. Pierce, you'll coordinate with our engineering director, starting tomorrow. Adeline, you'll facilitate that cooperation. Adeline's face had gone pale. Harold, I need to speak with you privately. Later, this meeting is adjourned. As the executives filed out, several stopped to shake Landon's hand or ask additional questions. Summer made her way to the front, fighting back tears of pride and relief. You were amazing, she whispered. Landon exhaled shakily. I thought I was going to pass out halfway through. You didn't show it. He smiled faintly. Old habit. Never let them see you doubt. Across the room, Adeline gathered her materials with sharp, angry movements. She glanced toward Landon once, her expression unreadable, then left without a word. In the hallway, Harold caught up with her. You handled that poorly. I handled it realistically, Adeline shot back. You just handed our flagship project to someone who's been cleaning toilets for 2 years. Do you have any idea how that makes us look? It makes us look like a company that recognizes talent, Harold replied. Something you used to be good at before you started believing your own press releases. That's unfair. Is it? When was the last time you actually listened to someone below your level? When was the last time you considered that you might be wrong about someone? Adeline had no answer. Harold continued, his voice softer now. You've accomplished incredible things, Adeline. But somewhere along the way, you started measuring people by their positions instead of their capabilities. That's not leadership, that's hierarchy worship. He walked away, leaving Adeline standing alone in the corridor. That evening, news of the board meeting spread through Skybridge like wildfire. Engineers who dismissed Landon days earlier now sought him out with questions. Mechanics who'd barely spoken to him asked about his previous company. Even the pilots began treating him differently, with a respect that transcended his position. Summer found him in his usual spot, cleaning the galley of a citation jet, working as thoroughly as ever despite everything that had changed. You know you don't have to do this anymore, she said. Yes, I do, Landon replied. Tomorrow, I might be consulting on designs. But today, I'm still the cleaner. The work doesn't change just because people's perception does. She leaned against the bulkhead. You're going to make them all rethink everything, aren't you? I'm not trying to make anyone rethink anything, he said. I'm just trying to do good work and go home to my son. But you've proven something important today. That dignity isn't granted by position, it's carried by character. Landon paused, cloth in hand. My wife used to say something similar. She'd tell me that the most important work we do is the work nobody sees, the small acts of care that don't come with applause. He smiled sadly. Took me too long to understand what she meant. She'd be proud of you, Summer said softly. I hope so, Landon whispered. I really hope so. As night fell over Ashford Heights, two people sat in very different spaces, processing very different emotions. Landon sat at his small kitchen table, helping Isaac with math homework. The Horizon Project folder closed and set aside. His son's laughter filled the apartment as they solved problems together. And for the first time in years, Landon felt whole. Across the city, in her penthouse office, Adeline Scott stood at the window overlooking the glittering skyline. She'd built an empire, amassed a fortune, and commanded respect from thousands. But tonight, she felt smaller than she had in years, because a man in work boots and coveralls had just taught her a lesson she'd forgotten. That true excellence doesn't need a spotlight to shine. It just needs the courage to exist honestly. And tomorrow, when the sun rose again, everything would be different. The private investigator's report arrived on Adeline's desk Wednesday morning. 37 pages of Landon Pierce's life, meticulously documented. She read it in her office with the door locked, her coffee growing cold as the words painted a picture she hadn't expected. Pierce Aeronautics had been more than successful. It had been revolutionary. Landon had held 11 patents, consulted for 3 governments, and turned down acquisition offers worth over $200 million because he'd wanted to maintain creative control. Industry legends had called him a once-in-a-generation talent. Then came the section about Elena, the slow decline, the missed appointments, the phone calls Landon hadn't answered because he'd been in meetings. Hospital staff reported that she'd died holding their son's hand, asking the nurses to tell her husband she understood, that she forgave him. But Landon had never forgiven himself. The report detailed his collapse after her death, how he'd sold everything, donated most of the money to cancer research, and disappeared from the industry completely. Former colleagues had assumed he'd left the country or had a breakdown. None had suspected he'd simply chosen to become invisible. Adeline set down the report, her hands trembling slightly. She'd built her entire identity on reading people, on identifying potential and weakness. Yet she'd looked at this man every day for months and seen only a cleaner, only someone beneath her notice. She'd been so spectacularly, completely wrong. That afternoon, she found Landon in the engineering workshop, working alongside the senior design team. They were testing stress calculations on the Horizon project's wing design, and Landon was patiently explaining load distribution principles to 2 younger engineers who hung on his every word. "Mr. Pierce," Adeline said from the doorway, "may I speak with you privately?" The room went quiet. Landon glanced at his colleagues, then nodded. "Of course." They walked to an empty conference room. Adeline closed the door and, for a long moment, said nothing. "I had you investigated," she finally admitted. Landon wasn't surprised. "I assumed you would. I read about your wife, about your company, about everything you walked away from." She paused. "I owe you an apology." "You don't owe me anything, Miss Scott." "Yes, I do," she insisted. "I humiliated you publicly. I dismissed your worth based on your position. I treated you as invisible because I couldn't imagine that someone in your role could have value beyond the services you provided." Her voice cracked slightly. "I was wrong, and I'm sorry." Landon studied her carefully. "Do you know why I didn't defend myself when you confronted me that first day?" "No, because I saw myself in you," he said quietly. "The obsession with perfection, the need to be seen as the best, the belief that success equals worth. I lived that way for 15 years, and it cost me everything that actually mattered." Adeline felt tears threatening. "How did you let it go?" "I didn't let it go," Landon replied. "It was ripped away from me. And in the aftermath, I had a choice: become bitter about what I'd lost, or grateful for what remained." He gestured toward the workshop. "I chose gratitude. For my son, for simple work, for second chances I didn't deserve." "I don't know how to be that person," Adeline whispered. "You start by asking yourself what you're building toward," Landon said. "Are you building an empire so people remember your name? Or are you building something that matters after you're gone?" The question hung between them like a bridge waiting to be crossed. News of Landon's presentation spread beyond Skybridge within days. Industry blogs picked up the story with headlines like, "From Cleaner to Chief Designer," and "Hidden Genius Emerges at Luxury Aviation Firm." The narrative was irresistible, a Cinderella story for the corporate age. But inside Skybridge, something more profound was happening. The morning after Landon's revelation, Bill, the night supervisor, stopped by the workshop. "I need you to know something," he told Landon. "I've worked here 12 years, and nobody ever asked my opinion on anything technical. Yesterday, an engineer asked me what I thought about hydraulic routing, because I've been watching these systems longer than most of them have been alive." Similar stories emerged throughout the week. Administrative staff, who'd been treated as furniture, suddenly found themselves included in meetings. Junior mechanics were asked for input on designs. The rigid hierarchy that had defined Skybridge began to soften as people realized competence existed at every level. Summer watched the transformation with quiet amazement. In the cafeteria, she saw pilots, sitting with maintenance crews, actually listening. In the hallways, executives greeted custodial staff by name. It wasn't dramatic, but it was real. "You've changed the culture here," she told Landon during a coffee break. "I haven't done anything," he protested. "You existed authentically," she replied. "Sometimes that's enough." The most striking change was in Adeline. She began arriving earlier, staying later, not to work more but to observe more. She attended morning maintenance briefings, asked questions instead of issuing directives, and actually listened to the answers. One morning, she found Landon teaching a small group of junior engineers. She stood in the back, watching him break down complex aerodynamic principles, using only a whiteboard and patience. After the session, she approached him. "You're a natural teacher." "Elena used to say the same thing," Landon replied. "She thought I should have been a professor instead of a designer." "Would you consider it? Teaching here formally?" Landon hesitated. "What are you asking?" "I'm asking if you'd accept a position as Director of Innovation. You'd split time between design work and mentoring our engineering teams." She paused. "No pressure, no expectations beyond sharing what you know." "I need to think about it," Landon said carefully. That evening, he discussed it with Isaac over dinner. "So they want you to be a boss?" his son asked. "Something like that. Would you have to work late like before?" The question pierced Landon's heart. "I don't know, buddy. That's why I'm not sure I should do it." Isaac was quiet for a moment, pushing peas around his plate. Then he said, "Mom used to tell me that you were really good at building things. She said you could make anything fly if you tried hard enough." "She said that?" Isaac nodded. "She also said the hardest thing about loving you was watching you forget to love yourself." He looked up, his young face serious beyond his years. "Maybe this time you could build things and still be home for dinner." Landon felt tears building. "When did you get so wise?" "I had a really good mom," Isaac replied simply, "and a dad who's trying really hard." The Meridian presentation was scheduled for Friday morning. Harold Westbrook assembled the team in the main conference room Thursday evening for final preparations. The Horizon project had been refined, validated, and polished into something extraordinary. "Tomorrow determines the next decade of this company," Harold told the assembled group. "Landon, you'll be presenting the technical specifications. Adeline, you'll handle the business case. Questions?" Landon raised his hand. "Actually, sir, I need to discuss something with you privately." They moved to Harold's office. Landon closed the door and took a breath. "I can't accept the director position," he said. Harold frowned. "May I ask why?" "The board approved it unanimously. The compensation package is exceptional." "It's not about money," Landon replied. "It's about knowing myself well enough to understand what I can handle." He sat down. "For 2 years, I've had a rhythm. I work, I go home. I'm present for my son. It's simple, sustainable, and it's healing. Taking this position would pull me back toward the life that destroyed me before." "But you're different now," Harold argued gently. "Am I? Or am I just one high-pressure deadline away from becoming who I used to be?" Landon shook his head. "I've learned that some doors should stay closed, not because what's behind them isn't valuable, but because opening them costs more than I'm willing to pay." Harold leaned back. "So, what do you want?" "I want to consult," Landon said. "Part-time, project-based. I'll help with designs, mentor your engineers, contribute where I can. But I won't carry a title that comes with expectations I can't meet, without sacrificing what matters most. That's a lot to walk away from." "I'm not walking away," Landon corrected. "I'm walking toward something better, toward balance, presence, peace, toward being the father Isaac deserves and the man Elena hoped I'd become. Harold studied him for a long moment, then extended his hand. Then that's what we'll do. Part-time consultant, your terms, your schedule. Deal? Landon shook his hand, relief flooding through him. Deal. The next morning, the Meridian executives arrived in a convoy of black cars. The presentation lasted 90 minutes. Landon explained the technical innovations with quiet confidence. Adeline presented the business model with uncharacteristic humility, even crediting Landon publicly for the design's brilliance. When they finished, the lead Meridian executive stood. This is the most innovative proposal we've seen. You have our contract. The Skybridge team erupted in celebration. Harold embraced Adeline. Engineers high-fived. Someone popped champagne. Landon slipped out quietly. Summer found him outside, sitting on a bench near the hangar, watching clouds drift past. You're missing the party, she said. I was never good at parties. She sat beside him. You just secured the biggest contract in company history. We secured it, he corrected. And tomorrow, I'll still be cleaning aircraft. Just maybe with better conversation during breaks. Summer smiled, then asked, Did you turn down the director position? How did you know? Because I know you, she said simply. And I know you've learned the difference between success and fulfillment. They sat in comfortable silence, watching planes take off in the distance. 3 months later, Skybridge Aviation looked different, not in structure or layout, but in spirit. The Meridian contract was underway, the Horizon project moving from concept to prototype. But more importantly, the company had learned to value people over positions. Landon worked 3 days a week as a consultant, spending mornings with engineers and afternoons cleaning aircraft. He was present for Isaac's school events, coached his soccer team, and had dinner with his son every single night. Summer had been promoted to senior aviation coordinator. She and Landon had grown closer, their relationship deepening from friendship into something neither rushed to define. They simply enjoyed each other's company, two people healing at their own pace. One Saturday morning, Summer brought Isaac to the hangar to see the Horizon prototype. The boy stood beneath the aircraft's wing, eyes wide with wonder. You really designed this? Isaac asked his father. I did. It's beautiful. Landon crouched beside him. You know what makes it beautiful? Not the metal or the engines, but the reason behind it. I built this thinking about the world you'll inherit, about making things better for your generation. Isaac hugged him tightly. I'm proud of you, Dad. Those 4 words meant more than any contract, any title, any amount of money. Across the hangar, Adeline watched the scene. She'd changed too, becoming less focused on image and more interested in impact. She'd started a mentorship program at Skybridge, created pathways for staff to advance regardless of their starting position, and donated substantial funds to causes Elena Pierce had cared about. She approached Landon as Isaac ran off to explore with Summer. Thank you, Adeline said. For what? For teaching me that strength doesn't require cruelty, that excellence doesn't demand perfection from others, and that the most powerful thing a leader can do is admit they were wrong. Landon smiled. You taught yourself. I just held up a mirror. As Adeline walked away, Landon felt Summer's hand slip into his. They stood together, watching the prototype gleam in the afternoon Sunday. You know what I've learned? Summer said softly. That the quietest people in the room are often the ones who've already fought the battles everyone else is still preparing for. And what have those quiet people learned? Landon asked. She leaned her head on his shoulder. That peace isn't the absence of struggle, it's the presence of purpose. High above, a private jet traced white lines across blue sky. Inside Skybridge Aviation, mechanics worked alongside engineers, cleaners contributed ideas that changed designs, and a man who'd once lost everything had found something far more valuable. A life measured not by achievement, but by presence, not by acclaim, but by love. Landon Pierce would never make headlines again. His name would appear in patents and design credits, but always quietly, always humbly. And that was exactly how he wanted it, because some victories aren't won with noise and spectacle. Some victories are won in the small moments, the daily choices, the quiet decision to be present for what truly matters. And as the sun set over Ashford Heights, casting golden light across the hangar, 3 people, a father, his son, and a woman who'd learned to see beyond surfaces, walked toward a future built not on what they'd lost, but on what they'd chosen to become. The jets would fly. The contracts would come. The world would keep spinning. But here, in this moment, they had everything that mattered. Each other, purpose, and the peaceful knowledge that dignity was never granted by position. It was carried in the heart of anyone brave enough to choose authenticity over applause. 18 months later, the aviation magazine lay open on the coffee table, its glossy cover featuring a sleek white aircraft against a sunset sky. The headline read, "The Horizon Project: How One Design Changed Luxury Aviation Forever." Landon barely glanced at it anymore. The first few weeks after publication, journalists had called constantly, requesting interviews and profiles. He declined them all, referring everyone to Skybridge's media team. His part in the story was done. What mattered now was what came after. He stood in the kitchen of a new apartment, larger than the last, with windows that let in morning light and a second bedroom Isaac had decorated himself. The walls were covered with drawings of aircraft, half of them designed by his son's imagination. The other, half careful recreations of his father's work. Summer emerged from the bedroom, pulling her hair into a ponytail. They'd been together officially for 8 months now, taking things slowly, building something solid. She'd met Alina's parents, had earned Isaac's trust, and never once tried to replace what had been lost. She simply added something new. "Big day," she said, kissing Landon's cheek. "Every day with him is big." Landon replied, glancing toward Isaac's room, where his now 11-year-old son was getting ready for school. At Skybridge Aviation, the morning briefing included voices from every department. Mechanics sat beside engineers, administrative staff contributed ideas freely, and the cleaning crew, now called the Facilities Excellence Team, had a rotating representative at leadership meetings. Adeline Scott still ran the company, but differently now. She'd started a foundation in Elena Pierce's name, funding scholarships for single parents pursuing careers in aviation and engineering. She'd also instituted a policy. Every executive spent 1 week annually working a frontline position, not as a publicity stunt, but as a reminder. The Horizon Project aircraft had entered production, with 6 completed and 20 more on order. Environmental groups praised its sustainability. Luxury clients loved its performance. And somewhere in the design credits, in small print that most people never noticed, it read, "Lead designer, Landon Pierce, consulting engineer." That afternoon, Landon received a call from Harold Westbrook. "We've been approached by MIT," Harold said. "They want to create a guest lecture series on innovative design thinking. Your name came up." "Not interested," Landon replied, as he always did. "Figured you'd say that. But here's the thing. They specifically want someone who can teach students that success isn't just about brilliance. It's about wisdom, balance, knowing when to push and when to step back." Landon was quiet for a moment. "How many lectures?" "4 per semester. Your choice of schedule. They'll work around your life, not the other way around." "Let me talk to Isaac." That evening, father and son sat on their small balcony, watching the sky turn purple and orange. "MIT wants me to teach sometimes," Landon said, "but it would mean being away a few evenings a semester." Isaac considered this seriously, as he did everything now. "Would you be teaching them the stuff Mom wanted you to teach?" "What do you mean?" "I found one of her letters," Isaac admitted. "She wrote it to you before she died. It said she hoped someday you'd share what you knew. Not to be famous, but to help people avoid the mistakes you made." Landon's throat tightened. "You read that?" "I'm sorry. I was looking for pictures, and I found it in your drawer." "But Dad, I think she was right. I think teaching people to be good at their jobs, and good at life, that's important." When did you get so wise? Isaac grinned. I have a really good teacher. 6 months later, Landon stood before a lecture hall of engineering students at MIT. He didn't wear a suit. He wore his work coveralls, the Skybridge logo, still visible on the chest. My name is Landon Pierce, he began. And for the past 3 years, my primary job has been cleaning aircraft. Before that, I ran a company. Before that, I was someone who thought success meant being the smartest person in the room. He paused. Today, I'm going to teach you something more valuable than any engineering principle. How to build a life that doesn't require rebuilding later. In the back row, Summer sat with Isaac, watching. The boy leaned over and whispered, "Is Dad famous now?" "No," Summer whispered back. "He's something better. He's whole." Outside, the first snow of winter began to fall. Somewhere, private jets crossed continents, carrying people toward destinations unknown. And in a small apartment in Ashford Heights, a photograph sat on a mantel. Elena, Landon, and baby Isaac, frozen in a moment before everything changed. Beneath it, a new photo had been added. Landon, Isaac, and Summer, laughing on a beach, building something new from the pieces of what remained. The past couldn't be changed, but the future was still being designed, one present moment at a time. And this time, Landon Pierce knew exactly which blueprints mattered most. Not the ones that made machines fly, but the ones that kept hearts grounded in what truly matters: love, presence, and the quiet courage to choose peace over applause. Always. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.